Oh, Lisa, sorry as well. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Sandra, are we all set? Thank you for the opportunity, just while we're getting a video started, of allowing Lisa and I to be here today to present to you on this item. Hobsonville is about 12 kilometres northwest of Auckland, or a very pleasant ferry ride of around about 40 minutes. The area is a very fast-growing modern area. Lots of facilities are being put in place for the new residents. There's boardwalks right around the coastline, and of course there's the new sustainable sports park.
It's about pulling together the best approaches for green infrastructure, the most sustainable approaches to the built elements in the park environment. It's about enhancing biodiversity, and it's about connecting people with nature. It's about combining Te Auranga, Maori design principles, and working closely with iwi and the community. It's about doing something quite unique, and to help us with that journey, we're using the ISCA IS rating tool. This is the first time this tool has been used in a park-based project in New Zealand.
So as you can see behind me, the site's currently in farmland, but what we hope to achieve here is a large-scale sustainable sports park. So there's a mixture of active sport, passive sport and ecological restoration. We've got 3 large full-size football fields, 2 large baseball diamonds with full-size backstops and dugouts. But we're not just catering for the sporting community. There's lots of picnic areas, playgrounds, passive areas, catering for all.
The kakapo of Hobsonville, Epilobium hirtigerum, because of the presence of this plant, it will now also include this significant area of ecological reserve. We need nature around us as much as it needs us.
For us, anything that's ngahere is important. It's part of our ecosystem, and we need to respect all of it. There's a place for everything, and everything has a place.
We'll be reducing carbon emissions over the entire life cycle, right from the design through to construction and right down to even decommission side of the park. We're looking at a combination of synthetics and natural turfs, and we're looking to provide the right mix of those such that we can get the hours of play up, and by getting the hours of play up on the asset really utilises the resource, which is sustainable in its own right. The water system at the park integrates best practice stormwater management approaches. It's really integral to the whole core of the project. We're looking at capturing stormwater, we're looking at recycling that stormwater, and we're looking at novel ways where some of these fields are actually irrigating themselves from the bottom up, which saves on water. So occasionally we will need extra water, so we are going to investigate the use of a bore on site. That bore adds a level of resilience to the system and just gives us another aspect to manage that water in a real holistic way. In addition, we're looking at substituting a lot of the materials that go into a sports park. For example, a lot of the sand that goes into a sand carpet field, we're looking to replace that with crushed recycled glass. At its core, the park is a sustainable sports park.
It's really exciting. We hope this will be an exemplar and a model and a flagship project for others to learn from, so we'll share as we go.
He aha te mea nui o te ao. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Tis people, tis people, tis people.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Thank you for watching that video, and you'll, I'm sure, be as enthusiastic as we are at our local board of seeing such an amazing facility actually commence. So just for the PowerPoint presentation, yep, have we got a, oh, you can click it through. Okay, so basically what we're saying here is there's local need, sub-regional need and regional need. And we have the resolution of the local board that's basically asking for the proceeds from the disposal of the property to be put into the park. Just some background, the land was purchased by Waitakere City Council back in 2007 solely for a sports park. So I think this is a little different from other areas of land that we look at disposing of. This was specifically bought for that purpose. Next one. Oh, okay. Just this slide is just there to show you the areas in white are the two parcels of land that are currently in that whole park area. So I thought it was probably useful so that you could actually see those areas. Those are the two parcels of land that are considered for disposal, which the local board is supporting. I think that with the disposal of the land, there will be a neighbourhood area plus residential. There will be a plan change that will have to be undertaken. So there'll be considerable benefits to the park users of having that, and also for those living in that residential area as well, having the park there. Yeah, I think so. Oh, which way you go?
Sorry, I'll point at Sandra. No, it's not working.
Oh, there we go. This is just to show you why now. We're very, very keen that this development starts this year. You'll see there the 1996, there's not a lot of housing. 2017, you can see the considerable amount of housing and development. And for any of you who've been out there recently, you'll know that in fact now 2019 will be considerably more white than it is there in that photo. The codes are experiencing insufficiency and capacity, particularly football and baseball. There is a shortage of park and sports facilities in the area and in the region. So hence our desire to move on with this project. Ready to deliver and what's missing. Basically, the master planning has been done, the needs analysis, the necessary consents have been lodged, the community and iwi consultation has occurred, the design, there's been extensive work with the local board looking at the design features, and we've now come up as of 2 weeks ago with what we feel is a very appropriate design for the sustainable sport park. I guess the issue for us is that this does fit the criteria for growth funding. However, we've been advised there's insufficient funding there in that growth fund. The project will be delivered in stages, and you'll see stage 1 is the earthworks, construction of the sports fields and other infrastructure. The full delivery of stage 1, if it's done in one part, will be much more cost effective, will minimise disruption of the site and the surrounding area, and it will lead to this amazing sustainable sports park. We are very concerned that already the project has been delayed and is behind what the local residents were promised some years ago. And so we really believe that the money from the sale should go towards stage 1, so at least we can complete stage 1. It's my understanding too that the land to be sold is in-service land, and in the last LTCP, the direction was given that in-service land could be used, the money from it could be used for reinvestment in the area. So hence our very strong desire to have you all today support the ring funding of the sale money into the stage 1 for the sustainable sports park. I think that's basically the key. Do you want to add anything?
Just that the land is required for this purpose. It's a way of minimising cost to ratepayers. It reduces the call on the growth fund that you're going to be looking at, and there's going to be more requests than there is the ability to deliver. So this is a way of making this site more self-sufficient. We also disposed a significant portion of the land a couple of years ago to the Ministry of Education. There's going to be a new primary school adjacent to the park. That land was also acquired originally for the park. So the park has been made smaller over time because of that. And this is a way, council doesn't have a great history of selling the commercially sort of opportune pieces of land we acquire, particularly when we acquire land for parks. So this is an opportunity to do it as an exemplar. This is where we're actually minimising cost to ratepayers from the acquisition of this piece of land to develop this legacy for the future generations.
And there is this document that I have, Sandra, you have, if you can distribute that to councillors, which does give you more detail of the design for the sustainable park. So thank you for listening to us and listening to our plea, and we're happy to take any questions.
So Margaret and Lisa, be fair enough to say with that very slick video that it's quite clear there is commitment from this council and the various departments to get right behind this project. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Parks don't have the opportunity to plead their case because this is a Panuku report, so that's why we're here on behalf of the council, Parks, and our community.
Yeah, I understand that. Councillor Wayne Walker.
You mentioned that there's not going to be enough money, and what's the additional money that's required to complete the park?
To complete the park, I think it's in. Yeah. Yeah.
Rob, yep,
That
come on
would be
up.
better.
Yep.
Thanks, Rob.
So at the moment, if we're just talking about the stage one, the current estimate for that is around $15 million, and that's basically site clearance and it's enough to establish the sports fields in a functioning way with the associated car park and pathworks. So it's by no means the complete park, but it's enough to get the sports provision up and running. In the current proposed growth-funded program for the next 3 years, there's about 4.8 million allocated to this project, and that reflects. Those of you who were at the Environment and Community Workshop will recall the constraints that we've got over the next 5 years in the growth program, and a project of this scale is a very, very big chunk of what's available each year in the growth program.
Yep. Okay.
Just have a supplementary question around that. So there's a cost of 15 million, but there's only 4.8 million available. So we've got a pretty substantial shortfall. And I think you're telling us that because of the constraints that we've got elsewhere, we're not going to have the money otherwise. Is that a fair comment?
I think the best way to look at it is clearly the LTP sets out the budget envelopes for each financial year. For the first 5 years of this just adopted LTP, the amount of growth funding is limited, and that gets down to, for example, in 3 years' time, we've got 15 million for the whole region. Now, out in the later years of the LTP, there's considerably more money. Year 6 of the LTP, there's 60 million. Year 7, there's 80 million. So there's lots of money in the growth program in the future. It's really just a timing issue for this project and the amount of money we've got available to spend.
The other related question I've got just goes to the demand. The growth in this vicinity is substantial. I mean, the development is rapid because the infrastructure is in place and the houses are going up. So does it follow that there's a pressing need for this kind of park development in the vicinity? And I guess what follows on from that, the development of the park, ideally to completion.
Yeah, there's no question that there is a clear demand for the sports field provision for the Hobsonville, Scott Point area, going right through to Westgate. There's effectively there's very little current sports field provision. So all the residents in there at the moment will be travelling to other existing sports provision without sort of the benefit of having a home ground, if you like. So the need isn't in question. It's a question of timing and affordability.
Yeah.
Just a further question around the need, it'd be fair to say that this sports provision in this area is going to meet the needs of quite a catchment. It's not just the immediate vicinity.
Yes, so we're looking at quite a lot of capacity in this. So there's 3 full-size grass fields, 2 junior artificial fields, softball diamonds. So this will certainly meet the capacity, the needs for the planned new residential areas, Hobsonville, Scotts Point, and going westwards down round to Westgate.
And I've got one other quick question, Mr. Chair, and it may be a little bit outside of your scope, but I would have thought that in terms of timing, that the development of this sports park would considerably enhance the value of the land in the vicinity, particularly the
Councillor
land that
Walker,
we're proposing to sell.
I'm going to ask you to pose that question during the actual item, because this is a local board presentation. This is not an interrogation of Rob and the team. No, but we know where you're heading, but you can certainly raise that later. I have Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, in terms of timing, because these things can take a while, you can get on with the 15 million and get the substantial amount of it done, and then is it something we can look at further out where we finish it off, not necessarily need that money right now, just given, is that from Park's point of view?
The stage one, the 15 million price tag on stage one is enough to get all the sports field provision and the necessary infrastructure to support the use of that completed in one operation.
So that'll meet those early needs, and you've got your Ollie still for your indoor.
Yep. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just trying to get a sense of the timing and the population dynamics going on here. There's this big 60-page glossy document going towards this Scott Point Sustainable Park, and in the population there, and I think it's even a little dated, it has over 80-odd thousand residents in here within the next decade. So, Margaret, Lisa, how is the development of that 20,000 immediate area, 80,000 the big area, how's that panning out now at Hobsonville Point and Scott Point in terms of houses and apartments actually being built?
Just to comment on that, the amount of development is huge and it's ongoing. Every time I go there, there's more and more houses cropping up. And I think one of the important things too, that with the original zoning, the density was far, far less than what it is now with the changes that have occurred in the zoning. So it's more rapidly developed and will continue to in a manner that really does just suggest that we certainly need the sports field provision now, not further down the track.
The sports field is actually surrounded by special housing area consented developments that are underway. So there's schools, there's the land that was acquired for another primary school, there's a retirement village, there's 2 special housing areas either side, which will be medium density apartments and townhouses. So the open space, not just the formal sports fields, will actually be really vital for the well-being of all of the people living in that area. But Councillor Cooper's absolutely right. Phase 1 delivers the formal sporting infrastructure that's well needed now.
That's 3 full adult sports fields. So I would suspect that's going to be oversubscribed very quickly. And I think the other question I want to ask in terms of that regional output, I know Hobsonville Domain, which I think is the one area, that's used by other parts of the region too in terms of summer sports. There's cricket clubs play from all over and women's cricket. So am I right to say that it's not just going to be used for this immediate need in the area, there is going to be areas from Waitakere North Shore feeding into that as well? Is that a correct assumption?
I think definitely, and there'll be other sporting codes who will use it, and probably just like we have to go over the bridge, I imagine there'll be sporting codes that will come from the other side of the bridge to use it as well.
Okay. Just one final question, and I'll thank you, Rob, with the notion of timing here of the 15 million and the 4.8 available. In terms of this, this distinction between service and non-service, as I understand it from officers' advice, that during the LTP, given that this is, was essentially designated as park land, that is a service designation, that provision of sports fields essentially providing a service to the community. Is that correct?
So at the moment, none of the land is in service use. It's a future sports field, but it currently isn't a service, a land that is in an active service.
But its proposal is.
As proposed,
And if you don't approve the sale, it will become parkland, but it isn't vested yet.
So Margaret, and I have two questions. One is, rumour has it that you may be coming back to us, won't be this year, but it could be next year, but it certainly would be pertaining to the next LTP that you may wish to make this your Ollie. And it was very noble of you to combine your thoughts with the Henderson board on your Ollie at the time, which was the indoor facility that Councillor Cooper was referring to. So is that the case?
No, I have to say that while Lisa and I might have our personal views, this is not something that our board has yet discussed, and I suspect it'll be probably something we will discuss at our next board meeting. But as a board, we have not discussed it at all, so I'm sorry. I can't
that's
give
right,
you-
but that you're giving a bit of forewarning going forward, it could be. The second one, I've just got a note here, and I'm sorry, it's not something I particularly know, but it's my understanding if we were to set ring fences, which is not a good precedent, I'll be quite clear about that, for this committee, and I'll be advising against it. You realise that that would make you'd not be eligible for the DC funding. So the bottom line is you're picking up $2 million if we were to pass that resolution, and then you don't get the DC funding. So it's not really of...
I'm not sure why it would be all or nothing unless
No.
we've written
Oh,
a
well,
policy
I'm sorry,
and
I've been given the advice, and I can ask.
Okay, well, I think that's something we can't answer, but in terms of ring fencing it, we believe that this is a very, very different situation from other disposal proposals that you have before you and have had in the past, in that this land was specifically taken for sports field use many, many years ago. So there's been a very strong expectation in the community that that's what this land in its entirety was going to provide. So I think this puts it into a very different category when considering where the money should go from any possible disposal.
could use the word offset if you don't want to use the word ring fence.
Well, it's the advice I've been given, but anyway. There are no more questions, and certainly Councillor Cooper and Holst and myself do remember in 2007 putting the money aside to purchase this land, and it's great to see that the dream is going to be fulfilled at some stage, if not sooner rather than later. So thank you for your presentation, and
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Councillor Walker, would you like to move the recommendation, and Councillor Watson to second? All those in favour? Okay, it's right. We now have Andrew, Letitia, Richard, Rob.
Good morning. I do take the report as read. I just want to clarify a few points that just came up during the local board presentation. So just to clarify, yes, in 2007, Waitakere City Council did acquire it for strategic open space and future planning purposes. That was the wording in the resolution. As Rob mentioned, yes, the property is currently managed by Panuku. There's 2 commercial tenancies and 1 residential. That's a non-service definition. And the conversation was sort of drifting between the sports park and what we're talking about, which is in terms of the subject 5,500 square metres, which has always been intended for commercial and residential development. The area proposed for disposal is zoned as business neighbourhood centre and residential mixed housing urban. So just to clarify that point. Any actual disposal of the property, the subject 5,500 square metres, could actually be some time away. It's really dependent on the construction of the adjacent road, the land take for the park. The adjoining developer is required to build road through part of the property. It will then be vested back with the council. This could be 18 months, 2 years away before any actual sale proceeds are realised. And just to clarify, Panuku's been working with the council department since 2016 and will continue to work with the likes of Parks, Auckland Transport, Healthy Water and Watercare, who have infrastructure being constructed as part of that road. Just another key point, through the Mana Whenua consultation, there were no issues of cultural significance or any commercial interest received from our consultation. Just quickly touch on the two other properties we have proposed for disposal. 275 St John's Road, a residential property, no longer acquired for transport purposes. Ōreka Local Board supports the disposal. Through our Mana Whenua consultation, one iwi entity expressed interest, and as a result of additional conversations regarding the adjacent property at Felton Matthew, another iwi entity subsequently registered an interest for St John's Road. The last property is a small triangle of land in Clover Park, 303 Tingaringa Drive. Howick Local Board supports the disposal, and if approved, we'll be looking to dispose off to the adjoining landowner to realign their property. One iwi entity expressed commercial interest and did register some cultural interest. Following further conversations, once we informed them that Auckland Transport will be requiring most of the property, they withdrew their commercial interest and advised that their cultural input can be provided to Auckland Transport and Council as part of that transport project, which is requiring the majority of the land. So just those key points, free for questions.
Okay, right. Well, Councillor, just draw your attention to clause 23, where no feedback was received from the Albany Ward councillors regarding the proposed sale. The Iraqi Ward councillor did not raise any concerns about the sale in that area, and the Howick Ward councillors did not raise any concerns either, and we've had local board from two of the boards that are supportive. So we're going to treat them as a together, but Councillor Simpson, do you wish to say anything?
I just wanted on record, Ants, you know what I'm going to ask you? Sorry, Anthony. Sorry. Please confirm that the Pony Club did not require the land at 275 St
Yes,
John's.
through the chair, community leasing team advised there is no interest in terms of a pony club, and also while the zoning for that land does permit grazing, it needs to be of at least 2,000 square metres. The site's far smaller, even combined with the adjacent property, still too small.
Thank you very much. I support the disposal for St John's Road.
Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Young, do you wish to comment, have any comment at all?
No, I'm quite happy. If you've been discussing with the Howick Local Board and they're all happy with that, that's good by me. Thank you.
I'm quite support Howick Local Board disposal. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Cooper.
Just a question around the zoning for the proposed Clark Road disposal. The local board members were saying that it required a plan change, but it doesn't sound like it if it's already zoned for mixed use.
Yes, so yes, through the internal consultation, what was originally proposed was only going to be on the neighbourhood centre and residential zoning. Parks have agreed to pull back the boundary on the northern part where the residential house is, just to assist in not having to remove the residential house, which is quite a substantial building. That area there, yes, it's probably about 15 metres wide, a thin strip. That's the part that would require rezoning. Yes, that's correct.
15 metres?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, we're just checking on an amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Watson and Walker. Councillor Walker, you wish to speak?
So just a question around timing. You mentioned as far as the sale of the 5,500 square metres that it's likely to be some time off. In a situation where council is spending a lot of money in the vicinity, that's likely to generate, I would have thought, a significant amount of uplift. Does Panuku factor that sort of information in around timing? So do you have various scenarios so we just don't flog something off now when we know that we can realise or are likely to realise significantly more later?
Through the chair, we've been working very closely with the other relevant business units, including Auckland Transport, Community Facilities and Parks, so that there's a synchronised approach to how the plans for the site are actually realised. So any future sale of the site will take into account the work that's planned.
So, I mean, if I just go to this, I don't doubt that there will be developers that would like to pick this up earlier rather than later, because they'll be astute and they will recognise that if they can pick it up earlier and it's cheap, that they will then realise the uplift. So again, going back to my question, what do you think's the most optimum time to sell this?
Through the chair, as we've already advised, that will be following the completion of the roading works. The land is already zoned for development. It would be sold in accordance with that. It would be sold at market value based on what can be realised on 5,500 square metres.
Okay, we have, Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the Clark Road, the sports park, has detailed design and consultation and things like that taken place already, or is that planned to happen in the next couple of years, or?
So yeah, the design's well progressed. That's the resource consents have been lodged. There will be further detailed design as we go into construction, but effectively the well advanced designs, and we're pretty much ready to roll.
And so, what current time frame are you already looking at? Because it's obviously going to happen, regardless of any decision that made.
So at the moment, the proposed budget provision for the project is $1 million next year, $3 million the following year. So that the current budget provision really defines what we can do on site. So at the moment, the works on site would be very limited to site clearance and some really preliminary earthworks. And until we have sufficient, a sufficient lump of money to get in and build the sports fields, then it wouldn't be delivered for that purpose until that time. So at the moment, in the next 3 years, and probably realistically then beyond that to year 5 or 6 from here, within our current budget envelopes, we wouldn't be able to create the $15 million budget allocation. So it'll be 5-6 years away.
Okay. So you notice we're going to move in a second for the substantive, what is substantive at the moment. And Councillor Cashmore, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Partially a question to Panuku. So the sales of these surplus properties go back into council funds, and then it's council prioritises through Community and Parks Committee, formally sets the priorities for the development of recreational sites across the region. That is the correct way of doing it up until now. Is that right, Si?
Through the chair, that's correct.
The suggestion to ring fence the property's value, to give it priority over others, would actually be supplanting that process?
Through the chair, can we please defer this to the finance team, because we're not responsible for council's long-term plan, and I'm not comfortable with us answering questions on that.
Yep, that's fair enough. Have we got anyone next like this? Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you mind repeating the question?
So we have a process in place where the sale of properties and the assets goes back into the pool, and that's used through the long-term plan process with amendments via annual plans to actually set the priorities for the delivery of the capital program for parks and recreational spaces. To actually ring fence a sale would actually be breaking that policy setting, correct?
That's correct. And just to also add to that, a development like this, we would normally charge development contributions on, and in fact it is included in the development contributions schedule for around $7 million at the moment. So if this money, so the development contribution amount couldn't be increased, or we couldn't recover that funding through development contributions in future if they were funded in another way. So obviously we can't double dip.
Like the statute.
Yeah.
Yep. Right, Councillor Walker.
I just need to get my head around a couple of things as far as development contributions are concerned. I'm making the assumption that as far as this recreation provision is concerned, that there'll be an element of development contributions for the additional population, but there'll also be an allocation for the existing population. That'd be fair, wouldn't it? This is not 100% greenfields.
I'm not sure on the details, sorry.
Okay, and just around this matter of ring fencing as in principle, is it not the case that we effectively have ring fencing now around these unlock areas, where the provision of sale in unlock areas goes to funding within those areas? Is that the case?
It's certainly the case in Unlock. This is not an Unlock area.
So the issue that I raise is that there are parts of the region that are being compromised as compared to those parts where you've got Unlock projects. So if you're not an Unlock project and you're sitting on some surplus, you've got a problem.
Well, that's an opinion. It's not the only
No,
opinion.
it is not an opinion, it's a reality.
No.
But
Yep.
the Panuku Transform and Unlock programs are ring fenced within the entire program, not within the specific location. So it is still for a broader benefit across the region.
Councillor Watson.
Trying to get a handle on this development contribution component of the discussion here. So we've heard there's a huge shortfall, even just getting to stage one here. I mean, this is just having your sports fields, you know, none of this other material that's in for the sustainable park, community hubs and covered courts and so forth and so on. So there's a massive, big expenditure is going to be required here. We can't even get to the earthworks part of it as it stands. So my question is, this $2 million or whatever it might be, 2.4 million or what it's valued at, how does that then preclude development contributions being charged for the balance of the project?
So through the chair, it doesn't preclude them being charged for the balance of the project, but it means that 2 million couldn't be charged through development contributions. And so essentially, the proceeds of the 2 million couldn't be spent on something else for other benefit. We have a way to recover that through development contributions.
That's my point. You're not going to be able to get anywhere near recovering the costs that are required for developing this sustainable park through development contributions, are you? Not if we're going to proceed in a timely fashion. I think that's the whole point the local board's trying to make here, is that the need is here now, and there's not the luxury of waiting for another 15 or 20 years to try and actually put some plant in on this on this sports park.
Well, Councillor, I think everyone would agree with. Well, that was more of a general question, I would have thought, because I think everyone around the table, please let me respond, everyone around the table would know there is a need here, but there is a huge need right around the city. We've got an OLLI program that we've got 201.5 million allocated in the LTP. We are thinking we need 400 or 500 million, which will be slowly addressed and we'll address again at the next LTP in 2 years' time. So there is a considerable need right across the region of where we need money, and yeah. That's
okay, we get that's with all due respect, that's a statement in the patently obvious. We all know that. We have a unique set of circumstances here, and what I'm trying to get at is how is this sports park just to its basic level, none of what's in the 60 pages of all the other stuff is going to be then funded within the next 5 years, if it isn't from such a suggestion as we've got before us today. That's my simple question. And I think it'll need an officer to.
Well, no, I'm not going to ask an officer to answer that. I mean, the thing is, we are hoping we're going to increase our revenues.
Well, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not asking you. These are figures that have come from the officers.
I'm not going to ask the finance staff to actually respond to that question.
Well,
maybe
why
Rob,
not?
I'm going to ask Rob. Would you like to, Rob, to respond to that, Rob?
I hope, I may be able to help just clarify. So at the moment, if you like, the default budget that is available for developing our local parks and sports fields is a budget line in the LTP. In its total over the 10 years, it's a substantial amount. It's something like 500 million off the top of my head. And that is 75% of that budget is funded by development contributions, or the debt is serviced by development contributions. The remaining 25% is serviced by rates. So that is the budget that we've got available to allocate to the development of new open space. As I said earlier on, the challenge we've got at the moment is the timing of that budget in the first 5 years is relatively modest. It's sort of 25 million, 15 million, 10 million, and then in the latter half of the year, there's lots of money in the LTP. So what we're doing at the moment is we are needing to manage our development program within the budget envelopes that are in the LTP. And as a result of that, there isn't the available funds to make large-scale investments such as needed in Scott Point. The timing of large-scale investments like this, because of the way the budgets are allocated, needs to be timed in the latter half of the LTP.
Yep.
So there is opportunities for allocating other money to this project. It doesn't have to be funded in that way, and that's the suggestion that the board has made, is that you allocate some receipt from a sale to enable this to happen sooner. That's a choice that can be made. Obviously, we know that this money is already anticipated to fund other budgets in the LTP as income, as part of the Panuku's target for generating income. So that money effectively is already spoken for, and we have the money that we have available to deliver parks, all in accordance with the LTP.
Mayor Goff.
This is question time. Yep. I'll make it a question. And it might go to finance, but if one board, and I understand why the board would like to ring fence it, I think we all understand that, but if one board is able to do that, why would any other board say, no, we'll put our money into a general pool that the council can draw on according to its priorities? Other boards are going to say, well, if we can ring fence what's in our area and still draw from the pool that other people have contributed, actually you make the system unworkable, don't you? You can only, if we set as a governing body the priority for expenditure, we can't cut across the priorities we've already established to cover the wider region if we're allowing money to be taken out of the pool for quite different priorities. And wouldn't we just be benefiting those areas, for example, that had a lot of land for disposal? They'd keep it all to themselves. We'd stop being a regional council in the sense of covering the wider Auckland area, and would be again a whole mixture of different ward entities, each doing their own thing, but no overall priority. Isn't that the argument against ring fencing?
Rod, would you like to have a go at answering that question?
Oh, I just pointed to Nicola.
Okay, Nicola. Well, we'll go Rod first and then Nicola.
Look, I agree. I think that, as Rob said, the funding that we get from the sale of land, which is predominantly community service land, community facilities land across the region, is a line in the LTP, which is a statement of intent you set for Panuku. You set it as that number. It's done as, I assume it just comes back into the pool as debt reduction or as revenue coming back into the organisation, and then the money is allocated back across the region on priorities.
If I could just make one more point through the chair as well. There's also differing amounts of land which are held across the region in different local board areas, and there's also different values, capital values differ across the region, so there would actually be gross inequality that would occur if property sales were ring-fenced by region, because there would be some parts of the region where land values are lower and they would be impacted negatively by such a policy, and there are other parts of the region which have a lot of property in particular local board areas, and their property values are of a much higher value, and they would be the beneficiaries of such a policy.
Yes, and we only need to observe the board next door, Henderson Massey, which was incredibly generous with what they were willing to sell and put back into the central pool. Nicola, do you want to add anything? Or no? Okay, we have Councillor Newman.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I think that some people are in danger of accidentally revealing how inequitable aspects of the unlock policy are. But with respect to development contributions, that is a causal charge, isn't it? It's a charge, it's a marginal cost levied against the developer for the marginal impact of growth. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I'll defer that question to finance.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so nothing in relation to what is proposed by the local board here resolves the fact that there would still be a causal impact of that growth occurring, which would then have to be funded by the developer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the contribution can still be charged against the developer, notwithstanding whatever is resolved here. Is that correct?
We can charge the development contributions for the amount that is allocated in the budget for that particular project. So if part of that project is funded by another means, we can't charge development contributions for that portion because we can't charge the public twice.
Correct, which means that when it comes to the next long-term plan or an amendment to the development contributions policy, you would just make a consequential adjustment at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess that's correct. Yep.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think, look, you know, we're trying to do too much here. This item's about approving some disposals, right? Period. Then I think the second issue is that we, in doing so, we need to actually try and fund a development on the site in a timely manner. So would, you know, in the interests of trying to move things along, would it not be appropriate for staff to, if the approval goes through for the sale, therefore turn around and look at potentially some rejigging of things as part of the next round of allocations?
That's where I was kind of leading with my questions of Lisa and Margaret. We've got next year, we've got the LTP. There's a moving feast on things. I mean,
silly not to do something because it is obviously a project that, you know, I totally agree with both the ward councillors and the local board. But I don't want to do something kind of right now. I think it just we need to get the staff together and see how this can work properly. That's the danger, is that we're getting into everyone hasn't thought about this properly. We know there's a problem, we know it has to be solved. But let's figure out the best way to solve that problem. Yep. And potentially right now, off the hoof, isn't it?
So I'm asking Councillor Watson and Councillor Walker, because you haven't actually moved an amendment yet. Do you wish your amendment to go up for discussion? Okay, right. Well, we'll put the amendment up and we'll now discuss the amendment. Who would like to lead off discussing the amendment? Councillor Watson.
Thanks. We've had a specific request from the local board here, and I think the more the discussion evolves, someone used the word inequitable, the more the kind of inequitable dispersal of funds generated from sales becomes apparent, and there's almost a random feature to that. We do have some areas. I mean, if I look at this area, I mean, this specific area, there was land sold for school. There's nothing back to the local board for that. There was land sold further up Clark Road to Hobsonville Land Company. There was nothing back to the local board or local community for that. In this instance, we've got, again, land getting sold that was part of the sports field allocation originally. And by the way, 3 full-size sports fields is a bit of a push for the population that's going to come in, and nothing back again to the local board of the community. So there's a fundamentally inequitable policy and operation anyway. This is a local board that hasn't asked for anything back and has not been the beneficiary of any sales. I think I recall the Marina precinct bringing in a huge sum of money in the sale process there for additional housing. The figures that have been spelt out here really paint the picture. We have this wonderful document going to Sustainable Sports Park, yet we're virtually falling over at the first hurdle in the area where is probably the greatest need in Auckland in terms of a growing population. And I don't think we quite did that full justice today, the extent to which this population is there now and literally increasing by the week. It's almost unrecognisable every time we go out there. I'm the ward councillor, I go out there and suddenly there's a massive big chunk of people actually living that's come up in the interim. So it's needed sooner rather than later, and the figures that we're giving don't stack up. 15 million, this is just for the site clearance for the sports fields. None of this other wonderful stuff to do with buildings, to do with a multi-purpose hub, a destination playground, a community orchard, Maori art interpretation, the epicentre, and the conservation education centre, the provision for sustainable technologies and so forth and so on. This is to get some grass that people can play a game on. Now, the way the figures are stacking up here, that's not going to come for quite some period of time. And we all know, with the best will in the world, there's always a delay component too. So the local board's actually quite right in saying that this is actually a more cost-effective way to proceed. There's insufficient funds. If there's not enough funds to do even stage one, then there'll be a split construction season. The project will be delayed and the cost will accumulate. So there's a real danger of being penny wise, pound foolish here, and I think that's come through in some of the commentary that we've heard. But I guess that there's also bigger than that. There's a credibility issue here, because this is, in some cases, this Hobsonville Point, Scott Point is the showcase for Auckland, isn't it? Intensive development, this new urbanised living mode, and I'm going to say it's kicked off. It's kicked off a long time ago. It's not going to have sports fields, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be no sports fields in the premium showcase urban development for 20,000 people. They can't play rugby, they can't play soccer, they can't play netball, they can't play cricket like they do in a lot of the other areas around Auckland. So the local board's quite right to put this up. This doesn't, as Councillor Newman has established, this doesn't affect the ability to raise development contributions, to make the appropriate adjustments there. This amendment is purely for the basis of trying to kickstart, and that doesn't go the full cost or anything like it, this 15 million site clearance just to get it started. Otherwise, we're quite right, as Rob says, we're looking down the barrel of the decade, the end of the decade. And there still won't be anything up then. So this is a bit of credibility test, because this whole community has been led to believe that with open space in general, which again, if we look at Bomb Point, there's an issue there, that's suddenly getting half down. But with the fundamental demand of a sports fields and associated complex, and we're not talking about the associated complex, we're just talking about the fields here, they're going to have to wait a very long period of time, in fact, an unsatisfactory period of time. So, Mr. Chair, rather long-winded, but the point is that this is a credibility test for the council here. There is an equity in the distribution of sale of proceeds from sale as it goes to Auckland as a whole. It's probably not the place to dig into it now. This is a reasonable request for a small portion to be used to try and go some way to starting this The site clearance, that's what we're talking about, site clearance, and then that accommodation could be brought in towards the end of the decade. If it doesn't happen, then basically what we're saying is we're kicking the development of the sports fields way down the track, at which point, you know, we'll be getting close to that 20,000 people, if not over. 85,000 people in the immediate environment, our council statistics tell us. 80,000 people and no sports fields to play sport. I don't think that's what the community bought into when they moved to Scott Point or Hobsonville Point or the new coming areas of Whenuapai, all of which will be served by these fields.
Councillor Walker.
I support all the comments that my fellow ward councillors made. I'll just add a few comments that go to it. Anybody that goes out to Hobsonville will observe one thing, especially around the development, and that is that virtually none of the properties, or very few of them, have got any kind of backyard. So you look at that whole development and it's high density. If you go there, you'll also find that you've actually got a relatively high proportion of young people there because it's attractive. You've got schools and the like. And as the local board has pointed out, you've got some special housing areas. There is some provision for economical housing out there. And as my fellow councillor mentioned, these children have got scarcely anywhere to play. The pocket parks and the like are very restricted. And these children have to go further afield to play sport. That's what I hear from the sporting clubs that I engage with, the football clubs, netball, rugby, cricket, the works. So we're talking about a sustainable park that frankly right now is not sustainable. It's an unsustainable park because there ain't going to be a park that's capable of being used. And what use is that? If we look at the amendment that we're putting up, particularly the second part, the wording says allocate the proceeds of the sale. Now that could be directly, it could be indirectly, it could be by way of an alternative, an internal loan. It doesn't have to upset any development contributions regime. What we're talking about is expediting a situation so that some desperately needed playing fields and facilities for young people in particular can be put in place. And I would suggest there's urgency around that because this is probably one of the fastest developing areas in the region. And as Councillor Watson has pointed out, it's a showcase. It's a showcase. So this amendment helps to expedite that, and I'm sure it would be economical. And even then, expediting it is still going to be years off, even as it stands. It's not going to be available tomorrow, but at least it will be there. So I would ask fellow councillors to support this. If Councillor Watson and I have perhaps made an error around the wording and the officers have got any suggestions in terms of how it could be massaged, then that's fine. But our intent is clear, and that is to provide desperately needed recreation for a huge number of children, older people and others that live in this area.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Watson and Councillor Walker, but it doesn't make me want to vote for this. And my issue is that I agree with what they're saying, but ring fencing $2 million is not going to change the priority list we've already supported. The priority list we all supported put this development slightly out further, but the money is there. There's 1 million and there's 4 million the year after next year, and then there's the 16.5 sitting 2 years out from that. We've already been told that a sale could take up to 2 years to process, so ring fencing that funding is going to end up falling into the year anyway, where we actually have the funding allocated outside that. So it's not, ring fencing is not going to change the priorities unless we revisit the whole priority list, which there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, which I assume all of us would be advocating for, you know, regionally, but also for our own areas to move things forward. I've got some of our local boards asking for things moved up. So adding 2 million is not going to achieve the first stage because we've been told that's 15. That's why there's 16 sitting slightly further out. If we want to discuss reprioritising the whole program, then that's what we should be doing. Simply ring fencing money that will come in about the same time the funding is allocated in the future isn't going to do anything. So I absolutely understand why the councillors and the local board would be asking for this and hoping to speed it up, but that actually isn't the process that we prioritise our parks projects or our sports field projects, and that's why this sits outside of that, and I think it'd be bad process to do that. So if the budget allows, and if the priority, we relook at this again, because we've already passed this priority list, if we need to relook at it again, or the new council next year reprioritises that separate than actually this funding round. So it sounds good, it sounds like we'd do it, but actually we'd be giving false hope to the local board by ring fencing money which won't make a difference to the outcome or the process. So it sounds good, but it's actually not going to change anything unless we completely change our priority list and move that whole 16 million forward, which may be something, but that's not that argument for now.
Thank you, Councillor Hills, and that has been offered, and will be a matter of fact coming in the next LDP. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And I just wanted to say, when I asked my question before, I was told there's enough money to do stage one, and that's what I was told. So I'm comfortable with that, and it will be further out, and I agree with Councillor Hills. If we're going to reprioritise, do it together, I'd be very happy to support reprioritising this. But I just wanted to say, as someone who lives very close to this and probably goes down there 2 or 3 times a week, and often I walk in the weekends down there or cycle, and I just wanted to make sure people understood that the people that live at Hobsonville Point don't go without recreation opportunities, because I see them all the time. There's people walk everywhere. There's amazing dedicated walkways all around the point. It is fantastic. People are out with their dogs. There's a dedicated dog park. And even though we haven't purchased Bomb Point yet, it's still used. It's used very intensively. The other thing is the local cricket and sports field, Hobsonville Domain, is within walking, cycling or scootering distance, and you see the kids going up there. And Waitakere Cricket Club is about 8 or 9k away, which is not an awful lot of distance for people to go and play soccer or football, whatever you call it. There's also the West Lake Boys Rowing Club, which a lot of the kids that live at Hobsonville go there. They've got the rowing club there, the yacht club. There's a lot going on, scouts. And so there is a lot of activity there, and people, and lots of parks where people can kick a ball around, especially de Havilland Drive, which is just a big flat piece of area, and people go out and kick balls. So in the meantime, there are opportunities. Cricket's played on Hobsonville Domain as well. But of course, we do need to invest in that area. That's the point why we bought that land in Waitakere days, because we knew that was coming. So I can't support this money being ring-fenced at the moment. You know, we do have opportunities for people. It's got to come in its turn with everything else. Otherwise, we have to displace somebody else.
Yep.
That $3 million or whatever it is coming in 3 years will not go to some other community group.
Mayor Goff, to wrap up the discussion on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. When we work out how we allocate $500 million from our public open space budget over the 10 years, we look right across the region at council, because that's our responsibility. We make decisions regionally, and we make those decisions according to a set of priorities. And that is the way, logically, we need to do it. If you suddenly decide, no, we're going to ring fence in some areas, different money according to different priorities, our decision making becomes arbitrary and ad hoc. And look, I'm not blaming the local board for putting their case. I'd do the same in their position. Their job is to advocate for their local area, Our job is to look across the region and decide how equitably best to allocate that funding. Now, you know, I'm all in favour of the Scott Point development, looks really exciting, but we've already heard that 2 million towards the 15 million is not going to bring the project forward, and that 2 million is not going to be available for several years anyway. So we're not achieving anything immediately for Scott Point. But if we make a decision that we will allow one board to ring fence, why would any board say, well, we're going to sell the proceeds of disposals in our area, but we're going to put it into the pool, we're not going to ring fence it for ourselves? No, every board would say, well, if others are doing it, we want to keep it ourselves. And then what is the impact of that? If you're in a board area where you have a lot of surplus land, simply because there might have been an Auckland Transport project and there's land left over, or if you're in a board area where the land is really valuable, you get a better deal than somewhere else that might have a bigger need. So we can choose not to be a unitary council. We can choose to be, you know, look after 15 or 16 different wards in different ways according to different criteria, or we can apply the same priorities across the region in a sensible, rational and equitable way. But let's not pretend we can ring fence one area and that every other board area then wouldn't want to apply those rules for themselves. Because why would you put into the pool if you see somebody else not putting into the pool but drawing out of it? And I think that's not a fair go, and I don't think it works, and it would not meet our responsibilities for making our decisions regionally.
Right, now I don't want to draw this out, but it's been brought to my attention that this, with having the words of stage one, would lead to complications if, in the off chance, this was passed. So Andrew Duncan, can you just come up and explain to us why this, if this was passed with of stage one in there, what consequences it would lead to? So I could have just put the motion, but as I say, if it was passed, it would have led to further complications. Andrew. Microphone, Andrew.
I was just checking with one of my colleagues, but I think if the money was used for something extra on top of our standard service level, probably I don't think it would be an issue. But if it was used for something that was within the standard service level, then we might need to adjust the DC policy.
Yep, that's all you need to say. That's all you need to say. We accept that advice. Okay, so you know. I could put it like this: if it passes, we'd then have to go and adjust the DC policy. But you know, I don't know. No. No, Councillor Walker, you've spoken. You have spoken. No, there's no questions. No. Okay, well, we're going to leave it like it is, and if remember, we're only voting on A2 here, so I'm going to put A2. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Right, it's not carried. We go back to the substantive, and I'm going to put the substantive, which is A and B. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Okay. Right, recorded by Councillor Watson and Councillor. And we're going to do one more item, and then we're going to have lunch, folks. We're going to go to item number 11, and we welcome Richard back again. And